David, if you won't mind, I'll start with you. I know from previous conversations that we've had, David, that you are optimistic from your wider work around the clean tech space, that there are opportunities for growth in the employment sector. What's your sense of things specifically within the e-mobility side of your work?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you'd expect, a lot of my time I spend talking directly to founders and CEOs of companies within the space, but also a lot of VCs and investors and accelerators as well. And whilst we know there are challenging times, pretty much uniformly, there's an optimism that during Q3 and certainly into Q4, there'll be a good opportunity, a good uplift in growth. We conducted a survey actually just a matter of weeks ago across our clean tech client base, which is probably about 50% there or thereabouts around smart mobility, around people's thoughts on growth and their willingness and opportunity to bring new people into their businesses. And this was particularly talking to CEOs exclusively. And that poll found that 65% of them were expecting to expand their teams or grow their teams within the next 6 months, which was pleasing, of course, for our business, but more broadly for the sector. And I know we're going to talk about this quite a good deal, but 85% of them are expecting the stimulus packages and growth packages to coming out from various state, federal and government organisations to be linked to some form of green recovery, which would be tremendous if that happens. And obviously the indicators are that at least some of that will happen.
And what, I mean, very exciting news and very positive news for us all. Are there any particular areas of recruitment, any particular sectors in terms of whether it might be at the CEO level, business development, IT, are there any particular sectors that are attracting particular interest in your experience?
Sure. I mean, at Hyperion, we focus pretty much on the sort of C-level and 1 or 2 levels below, so it's more senior levels, but right the way across the board. I mean, whilst we build those sort of upper levels of teams, quite often we're working with companies, at least pointing them in the right direction to grow across the business, from sort of internships through to blue and white collar workers that are sort of making stuff happen or actually physically making stuff. So I think it's quite uniform, and probably more so actually in the, shall we say, perhaps the more blue collar areas, because we all know that once a project has been agreed or once there's a technology coming to market, that has to be deployed. And, you know, for EV charging infrastructure, for example, an awful lot of electricians need to be either trained, upskilled and deployed into rolling out sort of the EV charging infrastructure. So I'm quite optimistic that that will be quite uniform actually across sort of various different stratas of levels of experience and or levels of career.
So you think that people who perhaps have been furloughed or lost their jobs as a result of the crisis will be able to find a place transferring their skills across to the e-mobility sector, do you?
I certainly hope so. I think that's one of the challenges that we face as a sector as a whole as we grow. It's a bit of a downside of being a headhunter is that clients come to us wanting something ready-made and someone off the shelf that already has all the requisite skills, and then we're very good at doing that. But clearly, that's a very small talent pool, and what we need to do as a sector is be a bit more open-minded and to grow and take people from the sunset industries, the traditional automotive sector, the traditional oil and gas and energy sectors, reskill them, upskill them, and bring them into the clean tech sector. But I'd certainly like to think there are going to be big opportunities for people who've perhaps been furloughed in elements of distribution, certainly in elements of sort of contracting, you know, construction, electrical contracting. We'll find opportunities in the deployment and rollout of smart cities, and all the sensors that are required for that, and of course for EV charging infrastructure, which we really need to get motoring on. And obviously Jordan's doing a great job, and her team and many of our clients are doing a great job at rolling out or selling good levels of EV charging infrastructure. But we all know in order to get where we need to be, we need that to be hugely expanded across Europe, across the US, and indeed globally.
So are you looking for the UK government in particular to include some new policy initiatives that will strengthen the hand of investment in the charging infrastructure space?
I think so. I think we're very close to the private sector or to the VCs and to the private equity money. And there's a lot of that, as you've seen, that have been primed, particularly into micro mobility, and continues to be some very big deals there. Again, quite uniform, there's private money coming in. But that's always helped when there's public money, either as a co-match or just a sort of a pump priming of a marketplace. VCs feel a lot more comfortable if there's a general good tailwind, so to speak, from government policy. And we've certainly seen Macron in France, we've seen Merkel in Germany, and even Boris in the UK making good noises around a green recovery. It's really important now that we start to see that deployed.
Now that the European Union has announced that 750 billion euros of investment today, are you hopeful that the UK government will have more than half an eye on that, and perhaps come the end of the summer, the beginning of the autumn, make an equally ambitious statement about investment in the clean tech sector and specifically e-mobility? Any sense of that from your conversations at the C-suite level?
Yeah, I think, of course, to be in the sector, you need to be by definition an optimist, and but I am generally optimistic. We've seen the UK government make some very good headways and discussions around batteries and battery development for free mobility and supporting that sector. We've seen British Volt sort of starting to at least finding somewhere to break ground on a potential gigafactory down in South Wales. They've been very supportive of electric flight. Actually, I don't know if you saw recently one of my podcast guests, Val Miftikoff from Zero Avia, a company based out of LA. Not far from Travis, but they did their first sort of manned flight in support with the UK government. So again, there are plenty of good noises. We all know that politicians make a lot of noise. Let's hope and be optimistic that transfers into cash on the ground.
Very good. So all the way through this afternoon's session, we'll be inviting questions from the audience. And there are some questions that have already come in for you, David, perhaps not at your normal C-suite level, the other end of the age spectrum. A question coming in. Do you feel that there are employment opportunities for young people? We're keen in this discussion this afternoon to talk about inclusivity, and perhaps young people are going to be marginalised as a result of what's happening with the crisis. Do you feel like we're a sector which can open its arms to opportunities for young people?
I think so, yeah. I think that's really a challenge. I've got a 20-year-old daughter who's just started her first year at university, so I'm conscious of the fact that young people at and around that age are going to be severely impacted by whatever post-COVID tends to look like. But on the plus side, young people are coming through that are perhaps more digitally native. And two of the key themes that we're seeing both in mobility and actually in energy more broadly is digitalization. So there's an awful lot of opportunity for companies who are providing mobility platforms, energy services platforms, looking for a raft of digital skills. And certainly I think that's there's scope across all demographics, if you like, in terms of age, but I think very specifically, the younger people tend to be more digitally native, and certainly find that there's going to be job opportunities as we get more and more platform orientated and sharing orientated across both mobility and energy more broadly.
And perhaps young people are natively more interested, not just in digital, but in sustainability as well. So perhaps we're an exciting category for young people on that level.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly see a lot of data around at all ages, but young people in particular, but not exclusively so, that people are wanting to have careers with more impact. People are wanting to be able to go home and tell their parents, if it's young people, or go home to tell their spouses and their children and grandchildren, what I do for a living is actually making a positive impact on environment, on society, on our air quality. So there is a huge drive for people from the sunset industries that want to get into the clean energy and the clean mobility sectors. What we really need now is those stimulus packages, both private and public sector, which create the opportunities for those jobs.
Yeah, very good. I'm not sure if this person is a young person, but Cyrus asks about working from home as a result of the lockdown. Do you think that's going to represent some interesting opportunities for our sector? Does it make things freer and easier for people to engage with the recruitment possibilities in the e-mobility space?
I think so. I think that might be slightly more challenging at the really young level when you don't have a great deal of working experience, but of course that will still happen. But it was interesting, I was speaking last week at an internal collaboration and innovation conference for the NL Group, which has about 200,000 people globally. And almost overnight they had to transfer most of those people to remote working. They were in Italy, a lot of those people, so they were hit very hard early on in the pandemic, but they've got a global workforce. Wow. And it's been really encouraging to see how quickly they adapted to put most of their staff working remotely. Even those people who are actively engaged physically in obtaining and maintaining infrastructure were able to work a large part of their time remotely. We've everybody in the last few months, we've been working with clients, building teams and recruiting people and onboarding them without ever having physically met online. So it's possible. And I think what's been really beneficial from this whole process, it's been challenging, of course, on many levels, but I think we've seen that remote working isn't just for Fridays off or for the occasional day of rest and non-commuting. I think we've seen that we can really be productive
Mm.
and can really work and achieve what we need to achieve working from home. There are some caveats, of course, around culture and around mental health and stuff that we need to work on. But it is hugely optimistic that now we can not necessarily be tied by location when we are recruiting people, whatever that level might be, whether that's at C-suite or across the board, that because you have an office in wherever it might happen to be, you don't have to have people working there. And again, for people like Jordan and many of our other clients who work in, have offices in perhaps more remote places, that's really encouraging that you don't have to have the talent pool on your doorstep.
Very good. One last question then, David, before I move on to Jordan Marie Brompton, the co-founder of My Energy. Perhaps again, another question aimed at young people. So Brian asks, with the commitment to apprenticeships by the UK government, do you see there being an ability to make a specific EV installer apprenticeship scheme?
I certainly think so. I think that's an area where there are, I should say, still going to be a need. We all know that huge leaps have happened over the last couple of years, but equally huge leaps need to happen further, both in terms of recharging infrastructure, and as we then move on to, you know, electrification of fleets, DPD and others, as you say, all making sort of really big noises and really following on with investments into buses and trucks and light vehicles. That we need to have the right infrastructure. So I think that's one area where certainly perhaps there are some of the quicker wins, because it's something which is ready to go to market now. All it needs is support mechanisms, and it's not massively different or different from an apprenticeship in typical electrical qualifications and or electrical contracting, to add on those bits that are specific to electric vehicles and EV charging infrastructure.